Evening, everyone. Welcome to Family Matters tonight. We have Jeff Watson with us tonight, and Jeff's going to be speaking about love languages. So welcome, Jeff. It's really good to have you here.
It's great to be here.
A lot of us struggle with running on an empty love tank. Where does that feeling of love go after marriage? How can you keep your love alive in relationships? Understanding love languages is so important to building relationships, whether with our spouse, our children, or even with another person. The way we show love can make a world of difference to both them and us. It can make a difference between the relationship prospering or the relationship falling apart. And so what we want to do tonight is to learn how we can love and show love and hear love from the people around us and for the people around us. If a lot of us know about love languages, how we can be refreshed and reminded about it, how we can be motivated by hearing those principles refreshed for us, or how we can learn about them if it's our first time. So yeah, it's really good to have you with us, Jeff. And we're looking forward to what you have to say tonight. So I want to start with a Bible reading as well. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, I thought would be a good one. Verses 4 to 6. Oh, and a little bit of 7. 4 to 6. Not a little bit of 7. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It is not rude. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. So with that, Jeff, tell us about love languages. You're basing most of your ideas tonight on a book, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I'm actually basing what I'm saying tonight on Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages, The Secret to Long-Lasting Relationships. So it's an amazing book, and I'll be talking about it at various moments in the discussion and in the presentation. So you'll have plenty of time to absorb where it's coming from. And right at the end of the session, I'll just put up a slide with some resources that you can go back into to follow all this up.
That sounds great. Yeah. So let's just start with a question, and you might be heading for this one anyway. But someone gets happily married, wedding day and all that sort of stuff happens, and then they're married for a couple of years, and then all of a sudden it's sort of like you wake up and you go, oh, what's going on? Where's the love gone? What's the story?
The first 3 slides of my presentation are in fact devoted to that question. So if you'll allow me, I'd rather actually answer it through those slides rather than give you a summary straight up. Okay, all right. This is a topic that's very dear to my heart because it's greatly enriched my marriage with Lauren, my wife, and helped us relate with empathy to our 3 very different children. I need to add as well that I come from a tertiary education background where I've had the privilege of teaching management and marketing communication to some 3 decades of students, and as well some real-life business managers that I consulted to. During this time, I came to appreciate the significance of several approaches to communication and relationships that were simple enough for people to understand and yet powerful enough to transform their personal and their organizational lives. And many of these I realized had their roots in deep scriptural principles. Now, some 30 years ago, Gary Chapman wrote a book titled The 5 Love Languages that embraced his discoveries as a marriage counselor and a Christian communicator. Can you believe that this book has now sold 10 million copies in over 50 languages and has morphed into the 5 love languages of children, the 5 love languages for singles, the 5 love languages of appreciation in the workplace, and the list goes on and on. His original book.
Can I just ask a question there, Jeff?
Yep.
Have you read all of those books personally?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay. My question really was, does he say something different in each of them, or is it all very similar?
Sharon, when you actually go, and I've got this on my final slide, when you Google books written by Gary Chapman, the list just goes on and on. You'll just see them flashing across the screen. And he's done, because he's a marriage counselor, he's written many different kinds of books. But the love languages books are based on the 5 love languages that we'll be talking about tonight. I'm actually focusing on the family side, on married couples in particular. But he's written it for all these others. And the way in which he adjusts it is to the particular contexts that people are facing. For example, a single person faces a very different context to a married couple. So just bear that in mind when you're actually looking at the titles.
Sure. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so his original book was fully revised in 2015 with the tagline, "The Secret to Love That Lasts." So let's taste and see what Gary has to say to us tonight. And with this in mind, I've several aims for our time together. I've got 4 purposes, and the first one is to share an awareness of why love languages could be important within our long-lasting relationships, and that I'd like you to underline in your mind long-lasting. That's really critical here. Secondly, to build a picture of its potential to enrich our family life. Third, to summarize the key ideas from Gary's 2015 edition, The 5 Love Languages, so you can capture the flavor of his framework and see scriptures which support some of these ideas. And I need to add that if you've got an earlier edition of the 5 Love Languages, try and get hold of the latest one. I definitely have seen the improvement in what he's added in that 2015 edition.
Yeah, we've got the old edition. We've got the old edition, so I'm looking forward to getting a new one at some stage.
Yeah, I'd recommend it. The old version is still great. You'll still get the main messages, no problem. But everything's been updated on the 2015 edition. So you're reading a more aware context of how married couples and families in particular are dealing with the challenges of our 21st century. And fourthly, to explain how you might take this further in your own lives, appreciating there are both strengths and limitations in applying Chapman's model. So I want you to appreciate that this is not the total answer to life. It's just a model which can really enrich what we do. But as you'll see as I talk through the slides, Gary is saying that if we get this right, if we get this part of our marriage and our family relationship right, it opens the door for us to negotiate all the other challenges that are always important. And we'll get to some of those a little later on. Yes. So there's our 4 purposes that I'm seeking for you tonight.
Yep.
Okay, so the question that you asked, Robert, earlier on is here it is. You knew it was coming. What happened to love after marriage? Now, I'm going to spend a couple of slides here because when I reread the 2015 edition, I really picked up on this aspect, and I think it's a vital aspect for us to get our heads around. So please allow me to do a couple of slides on this. This sets a contrast that enables us to understand the power of the 5 love languages. So Gary Chapman opens his thinking on long-lasting love with a question that I guess has challenged countless couples throughout eternity. What happened to that pre-marriage love we once had together that was so consuming, so rich, and so wonderful that we could not contemplate life without each other. And on the basis of that attraction, that chemistry, we decided to become husband and wife. At the time, we seemed oblivious to the advice that this kind of passion was perhaps ephemeral. It's a big word, which all it means is that it would pass. And somehow we should grasp this and enter into our union knowing this. Well, Gary titles this the in-love experience. And at its peak, it is euphoric. We have met someone whose characteristics and personality create sufficient electric shock that our chemistry bells go off. And when these feelings are reciprocated, we start talking marriage, because all the romance novels, the films, and the ideals of our Western culture endorse that being in love is the vital foundation for a wonderful union. So just for a moment, picture the image of a beautiful bride walking down the aisle with joy filling her face as she sees her friends and family, and then her beloved turning to admire her from the front of the congregation. Now, there's a picture here of that very moment. Typically, though, any couple, as we see in this picture, represent two people with very real differences. Intellectually, they know this, but right now, emotionally, they believe they will work out these differences together, and their kind of love can overcome all obstacles because they'll say to each other, our love will last. So let's ask a question here. Is being in love then a myth? You know, Solomon answered unequivocally in these words. The voice of my beloved, behold, he comes, leaping upon the mountains, skipping upon the hills. My beloved is mine, and I am his. He feeds his flock among the lilies. So that's taken directly from the Song of Solomon, chapter 2. You can't miss the euphoria here. And Gary Chapman offers a very similar perspective. Being in love, he says, is no myth. In fact, he suggests it is reality for couple after couple who decide to commit to each other. But wait, there's also a deception involved. Serious studies have revealed that the in-love experience of romantic obsession has an average lifespan of just 2 years. Now that's give or take a little bit, but that's the research.
Yeah.
So the misinformation, the deception for us in this state, is that our experience of being in love will last for us. It'll continue. And there is good reason why being in love has to change. People who are romantically obsessed are genuinely obsessed, which means they lose interest in other pursuits. In some, and in many cases, their studies, their current friendships, their links to family and workplaces, their religious affiliations are diminished, altered, or sometimes rejected. You know, at university, I had the privilege of going to university, and I remember some of my close friends literally blowing an examination because they had just been jilted by their love partner. That meant an entire year of having to come back to uni in the course that I was in, which was rural science at that time. So clearly there are levels of such extremism which vary from couple to couple, but I know you will have your own story here, or you will recall someone else's story with great clarity. So what brings about this shift out of being in love? Well, ultimately, our in-love couple begin to express their heartfelt desires, their aspirations, their needs, their fears, their likes and dislikes in a much more grounded way. He wants to buy a newer car, but she flatly says, no, we can't afford it. She wants to spend their holiday with her parents and siblings. He says that he could not survive this extended time with his in-laws. So what is changing here?
There's a lot of differences.
What we are seeing in this is this couple moving from the instinctive responses of romantic intensity that are outside their normal behavior patterns to the reality now of grounded choices of two people who are still drawn to each other, but now expressing their perspectives in a more judicious and a much more prudent way.
Can I just interrupt and ask a question here, Jeff?
Yeah.
Why do you think people get to that stage where they are, what you're saying, sort of operating on a more grounded level rather than just the euphoric level? What is it that changes? Is it because it's not sustainable at the euphoric level?
I totally agree with that. I think God has actually, and this is my personal view, it's not something I read directly from Gary Chapman, but I think that God has hardwired us for romance. There's no doubt that there is chemistry between men and women who are looking for a relationship, and they find it. And what to me is it's endemic within us, and every kind of romantic novel, romantic film expresses some aspect or some dimension of that hardwired desire for finding that special person in our lives. And so, yes, I think it's something that is very much part of who we are. And why it can't be sustained is because, and I think Gary does this very well in his book, he says, look, it's an obsession. And you actually do run out of puff. It's you can't sustain the euphoria.
Yeah. It's a bit like a sprint compared to a long distance run, I suppose.
I think so. And
Jeff, can you hear me?
And I think sorry?
Jeff, it's Kathy. Can you hear me? Hello?
I just hello?
Jeff, it's
Kathy.
Kathy.
Can hear you, Kathy.
Oh, I just wanted to ask Jeff where he thinks that falls into the spiritual realm. Why do you think God's put us in this romantic, obsessive love? What is the equivalent, or where do you think we see it in the spiritual world?
That's a beautiful question. It's a really beautiful question. I think there are some wonderful scriptures which talk about Christ's bride and the church and the relationship that we can have through Jesus to the Father. I can only add this, and this has been my personal experience. There have been moments in my life where I have been so touched by the presence of the Lord that it's been euphoric. It is just amazing. And this was particularly early on in my walk with God. I just had these extraordinary answers to prayer and to events and circumstances, and I felt a glow which would last for days and days. So I'm not alone in this. I know many other people, and I'm sure many of you listening tonight will know about this glow. It's the presence of God's Spirit in our hearts and in our minds and in our activities. And I think that is the closest I can come to, but I'm sure there's more to it. So here's the next question. Is there hope for love after the in-love obsession ends? Now, Gary Chapman asserts that there is more than hope. He says there is a new reality, which actually can only start once the in-love obsession has run its course. It's driven by our emotional need for sustained affection and love, to know deep down that our partner accepts us, wants us, and is committed to our well-being. But this time, in a choice-driven, intentional way. It still retains the opportunity for electricity, excitement, and deep connection. So we don't lose that, but we obtain it in a different pathway. Chapman uses the image of a love tank to illustrate this. And you'll see the gauges up there which are trying to express this tank.
Yeah.
He visualizes that inside every child is an emotional tank waiting to be filled with love and affection. And he recalls a counseling session with a teenage girl called Ashley. Her mother divorced and remarried, but while her mother and stepfather provided for her physical needs, they did not reach her emotionally, even though they loved her. They were not filling Ashley's love tank, and she was now looking in all the wrong places for love. Ashley's love tank had been reading empty for many years. As adults too, we have an equal desire to have our personal love tank filled. And God himself says he wants to pour his divine love into our hearts through the Spirit he has given us. But in our personal, intimate relationships, our love tank could be running on empty or below full because our partner is missing our needs to feel loved. Tragically, this can occur even when our desire is to show love to our partner. And just like Ashley's parents, we are really trying to do this in the best way we know how. So what is going wrong? What is missing? And so we turn now to the secret to long-lasting love. This is what I think Gary is trying to convey to us, and it will be worth some thinking as we're going through tonight. He proposes that countless couples and families have missed the secret to long-lasting love. And that secret begins with dispelling the confusion that long-lasting love between couples is based somehow on the romantic in-love obsession that we've just been talking about. While, as we have been describing, this instinctive infatuation is typically the vital chemistry to draw us together, it's only the introductory episode of our Netflix series. The long-lasting love of our later episodes has some very different dimensions. So let's look at these dimensions. First of all, it is intentional and it is informed, rather than primarily instinctive and infatuated. Secondly, it's a love that is still emotional in nature, but not obsessional. Thirdly, it's a love that grows out of reason and choice, willpower and discipline. Because the love that is important to us is something you do for someone else, not for yourself. So Chapman says this: our basic emotional need is not to fall in love, but to be genuinely loved by someone who chooses to love me because they see in me something worth loving. And that is your security, and that is my security.
And turning that around, we can see that it's that it works the other way as well, where our partner needs to be genuinely loved by us because we see something in them worth loving.
Absolutely, right there.
It's got to go both ways.
Absolutely, and as we'll be talking a little later on, this is the key to unlocking the secret of long-lasting love, where both are involved in this. And there's a beautiful verse that I wanted to share with you before I leave this slide. It's one of my favorite verses in the Old Testament. It's in Hosea 11, and it's actually in verse 1. When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. Hosea 11 is the chapter for me in the Old Covenant, the Old Testament, which expresses the kind of love we're talking about. You have to read the whole chapter to appreciate it, because the verses that go on from this talk about the spurning of Israel to God himself. And yet God says, I love you. I still love you. So this is a choice that God is making. And this is what the secret seems to be to long-lasting love. It is still emotional in nature. It's not obsessional, but it grows out of reason and choice, willpower and discipline. But it's got to have that spirit, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through this in some later thoughts. So, if that is where Chapman is taking us, how can we break this down? How can we actually understand what he's trying to communicate here? So I want to return to that phrase that appeared on that previous slide, and the phrase is, love is intentional and informed. Just focus for a moment on that word, informed. If you are informed about something, you possess information or messages about that issue. And Chapman has messages for us about the possible ways we as human beings can fill our emotional love tank. From his decades of professional counselling and reflection, he suggests there are 5 primary love languages that he sees as highly significant in our relationships. The first he calls words of affirmation. The second he calls quality time. The third is receiving gifts. The fourth is acts of service. And the fifth he terms physical touch. Now, what is fascinating, though, about these languages is that we typically relate to one primary language to fill our emotional tank. And that while there may be a further secondary language that can be strong for us, the remaining languages seem to hold a diminished relevance in terms of their emotional impact. And I want you to pause and think about this. This is a vital piece of information, because the converse is also true. We typically relate to one primary language to fill our emotional tank. But if this is denied us, our emotional tank can be rapidly emptied. And our emotional tank can remain on empty with long-lasting impacts for the conduct and the behavior that we have in our marriages and with our children. So
So what you're saying then is, if we want to head from let's sort that way, empty to full, we need to get, for me, for instance, I'm going to need lots of words of affirmation to get me from there to there. But if Sharon decides to give me gifts, then it's not going to get me that far, because it's not really my thing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. And you'll see as we start to talk about this, some of this will become very, very clear. So let's move on. If that's okay, Rob, can I move on?
Yeah, go for it. Carry on.
Let's explore the 5 love languages now. And I can only offer you a brief overview of each one in the time we have. So I'm going to challenge you to discover the detail when you read Chapman's book, or go online to access the many resources that are there. You can actually complete a questionnaire which will assist you to identify your primary languages, and I'll put those up on the final slide, how to do that. All of us want to be appreciated, because the opposite languages of put-downs, withdrawal, judgment, criticism, and condemnation are typically so painful for us. Yet, if words of affirmation are also your primary love language, they will literally fill your emotional tank. Now, I actually know this because words of appreciation are my primary love language. And I can echo Mark Twain when he said, I can live for 2 months on a good compliment. Couples can thrive on well-chosen affirmations. And here's a couple of examples. I might say to my wife, "That colour you chose for your dress makes your eyes shine." Or she might say to me, and she actually has said this, "I really like how you keep our car clean. It feels so good every time I get in." Now, children, such as this young girl in the picture, can thrive on words of encouragement, kindness, respectful requests, and appreciation that are genuinely felt and conveyed by you. Yet, if you were raised in an atmosphere of nagging criticism, complaints, demands, and withdrawal of affection, finding the resources within yourself to offer these positive words will be a real challenge. And that's why you'll need to work at it. Chapman says clearly that real love is always a choice. It is intentional. And if your partner or your child's love tank is words of affirmation, I want you to try this. If an apple a day keeps the doctor away, then a true compliment a day might keep the counsellor away.
That's a really neat thought. I like that.
Yeah, okay, something you can remember.
Being a words of affirmation person, you know.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jim.
And I love apples, by the way. I love apples. All right, let's move to quality time.
Awesome.
My wife Lauren's primary love language is quality time. Now, I only found this out about some 5 years ago, after we'd been married for 33 years.
Oh, no.
True quality time is giving your partner your undivided attention. Here you are focusing on her eyes and face when she wants to talk, and not flicking down to the phone or looking off to the people on the next table. You are actively listening to what she's saying by acknowledging back what you've just heard her say and identifying the emotion she might be conveying. Now, here's a recent example. Lauren was talking about her recent COVID jabs. By actively giving her my focused attention, I can acknowledge that she felt disappointed about waiting so long for her appointment to come up, but that the jab itself was not painful, with only some next day fatigue, which for her was great. The strange thing in this for me in our marriage is that we've been blessed in sharing a great deal of time together. Yet, because quality time is not my primary love language, I assumed that this everyday sharing was okay for both of us. It was okay for me, but it was not enough to fill Lauren's emotional tank. And I think here is the vital lesson. We tend to express the primary love language to our partner or child, which is our primary love language. For example, because affirmations are my primary love language, it's easy for me to see opportunities for kind words or compliments. Yet to create quality time with Lauren required new and deeper learning for me, like being more involved in our gardening. Here, Lauren loves us spending quality time together, just like these two people are doing in the picture here. Now, could I say, I've really made an effort to do this in the last 18 months. So it just goes to prove that you can change things. You can really shift gears if you want to do something. And I'm actually starting to appreciate in a different way what gardening means. And I'm doing that because I knew it made a difference to Lauren.
And that's what you were saying, Jeff, about being intentional. You know, in the last slide, you were saying, you know, if you're going to do words of affirmation, be intentional and plan it and do it. It's the same with quality time, isn't it?
Absolutely. And obviously, a word of affirmation can just flow off in a second or so. But when Lauren and I dug up 8 trailer loads of hand-picked weeds a few months ago.
Wow. That's a lot.
I think you need more quality time.
Yeah, she realized I was committed to a quality activity with her.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. Receiving gifts. Receiving gifts has parallels throughout the scriptures. Think for a moment of the gifts wise men gave to Jesus as a firstborn king. Culture after culture around the world reveres gift giving at marriage ceremonies. Personally, I've experienced this love language firsthand because receiving gifts has been the primary love language of my daughter India. Chapman suggests that the power of this love language to touch us emotionally extends much deeper than the gift itself. He suggests that a thoughtful gift is something you can hold in your hand and say, look, he was thinking of me. He remembered me. Many children love to give a token gift to their parents, like a flower or a seashell, which indicates that gift giving is pretty fundamental to love. The gift of our marriage rings is an outward symbol of our inner feelings, and the best investment here is not monetary value, but the symbol itself, lovingly selected and offered. So discover the kind of gift your partner has already expressed excitement about, and then creatively begin there with gifts that you find yourself comfortable purchasing or making or just finding. I've got to add a little aside here. We have a recycling centre just up the road from us, and on occasions Lauren has just gone up and found a cupboard or something that she can restore. And one day I was in there and I saw another cupboard and I thought, this is a great idea, I'll bring it home. And I did. Well, she just thought this was magic. It really was an expression of this particular aspect of gift giving, where I just found something and I thought, Lauren would like this. And it was repaid in spades. So it doesn't have to be something of high monetary value. It just has to be something that's thoughtfully and carefully discovered.
Yeah.
It's the best investment. Now, there's a third element to this. The gift of your presence is just as vital. Remember I said that India had gift giving as her primary love language. Well, once she gave me a card just a few years ago, and she said some beautiful things on that card, but one has stuck in my mind. And in words similar to this, she said, Dad, you are always there for me, and I love you for that. You and I can say the same about the Father and Jesus. Their presence to us is their gift to us. So, yeah, it's powerful, isn't it? It's powerful. Yeah. All right, let's move on. Now, I couldn't resist putting this one up. I'll have to read it out to you. No woman has started an argument with a man while he was dusting, vacuuming, or washing the dishes. And we're on to acts of service. Now, I'm convinced that my son-in-law has acts of service as his primary love language. And my middle daughter, Asha, just loves him for it, because this is very high on her own love language landscape. And I'll just read this slide again. No woman has started an argument with a man while he is dusting, vacuuming, or washing the dishes. So people with this primary love language receive a glow of warmth when someone actually does something for them that requires thought, planning, and a positive spirit. And even as I was writing this yesterday or the day before yesterday, my wife Lauren folded up a new large horse rug into its original compact zip bag, ready to return it because it didn't fit my horse. I kissed her because it was unasked for, it was challenging, and I was sure that I could never have done it alone. So what is necessary about acts of service is first identifying what is possible for you to do for the other person and checking with them that these things are significant for them. Then secondly, being willing to make the sacrifice to undertake them. Activities that are difficult for you, but you understand are important for your partner, become expressions of genuine love, and the reward becomes their full emotional tank. So you've got to communicate. Be sure, be aware that you're not acting through fear, coercion, duty, or obligation to undertake these activities. Please don't allow yourself or your partner to fall into the trap of manipulation and demands. Those kind of exchanges are not love. But when we share a respectful request, that is the way forward. Now I'm going to pause for a moment, Rob, because this is a really vital area and you might just want to comment on this. There's many ways in which acts of service can be done beautifully and powerfully as an expression of love, but they can also be done the wrong way in the wrong spirit.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, if they're done as a okay, then I will. You know, you want me to do the dishes? Okay, I'll do them. That's not an act of service. That's a grudging, a drone of slavery. Whereas if you go and do, you know, you're doing the acts of, you go, I'll do the dishes for you tonight, dear. You know, or you just stand up and you just get up there and help. That's an act of service. Would that be right?
Yeah, you've got it. And one of the things I've had to learn is that I thought just doing something out of obligation because I knew that was expected of me was an act of love. And I've realized in the last few years, especially since I've been thinking about this love language, that by talking with Lauren and understanding the kinds of activities that were important for her and are important for her, I can actually just focus on making sure those are done. And can you believe the others don't matter too much? The things that aren't so important that I thought I really, really had to do are not so important to her. Okay. So I'll just give you one example. Often Lauren is working, and because I'm retired in the mornings, I can actually do all the final dishes. But I've got to the point now, because I know that she really loves having a clean kitchen to step into, I'll just go around and dry up all the dishes. I just won't leave them in the rack. I'll put them away. I don't do this every time, but you know, when the fit takes me, this is what I do. Yeah. And I just clean everything. And when she comes in, I know there's a glow that says, oh, he was thinking about me. He knows I love this. And yeah. That's the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that extra mile. And I think it relates a lot to that thing where Jesus said, the parable where he said about the servant, and he serves and he waits and he finally has his meal and he says, we've only done our duty. It's that service that goes over the top of that extra, well, like you say, that extra polish of the dishes, that extra wiping of the benches or whatever, that shows that extra love.
Yeah, it does. And I just wanted to pause on that because I think acts of service is just one of those really tricky areas that we all get involved in, and we don't get it right because we just don't talk to each other about it. And this is the difference. This is what Gary Chapman is trying to communicate. He says, you need to share this. You need to talk to each other about what acts of service are meaningful to you. And if it's your primary love language, this becomes critical. You really have to do this. Otherwise, you'll be off as this guy's doing here, you know, cleaning up the the stove filter, and that's the last thing she wants from him. You know, the thing she really wants him to do is go and vacuum, but he hasn't worked that out yet. He just likes to see that shiny, clean filter. So just be aware of this. This is a really, really vital part of understanding this love language.
That's cool.
Mm.
So we've got one more love language to go, physical touch.
Yeah, physical touch. Now, we're born with the absolute need for physical touch. Many, many studies have demonstrated that babies who are held, stroked, and kissed develop a healthier emotional life than those who are isolated or denied physical affection. And you'll remember that terrible and tragic discovery of the orphans in an Eastern European country quite a few years ago who'd never been looked after apart from being fed and just put down. And they were just so emotionally astray and affected so deeply. And that just brought home to everybody in the world how critical this is. So touch can communicate affection and love, or conversely, disinterest and hostility. As adults, we marry to consummate and enrich our physical love. But this subsequent journey for couples can make or break their relationship. So physical touch is not something we can just take for granted here. For some of us, physical touch is our primary love language. And with it, our emotional tank is filled. But without it, we feel estranged and unloved. So if your partner's primary love language is physical touch, then nothing is more important to him or to her than those appropriate moments of touching, and especially hugging. And in times of crisis when words are inadequate, we all reach out for those hugs, don't we? Some of us struggle to offer this. Rob?
It's interesting too that when a relationship starts to have difficulties, it's often the physical touch that's the first thing that just disappears from the relationship as well. Well, it's my observation anyway. And so, you know, someone with physical touch as their primary love language, that's going to just dig the hole even deeper.
Yeah. And, you know, in his book, Gary talks about couple after couple that he's counseled who have withdrawn from physical touch. And, you know, sexual counseling is all about reestablishing just normal touching and in ways that are not threatening, just loving. So there's all of these elements that are available to us if we want to reach out for it. And I'm just about to say that some of us struggle to offer this, especially if we have a family background of limited physical contact, or we have tried various physical moments of communication with our partner and then felt rejected. So I really appreciate what Chapman's saying in this section of his book. He offers wise advice, and he adds that there are numerous counsellors, courses and resources to reach out for if you're looking for assistance with this love language. All right, so we've covered all the 5 of them.
Yep.
Now, I'm going to ask another question here. Are love languages all that matters? And this is an important question because you've got every right to be skeptical tonight, and you might just think, oh, well, this sounds pretty good, but really, what's the basis of it? Well, psychological studies have yet to endorse Chapman's model, so I have to be right up front about that aligning love languages creates better relationships. But that's not the end of the story. The same research actually demonstrated the reverse, that when misaligned primary love languages were corrected, much better relationships resulted if both parties were involved. So what's very interesting is that professional relationship counsellors use Chapman's approach and report meaningful outcomes. And he actually says right towards the end of his book, you know, I have sold over 10 million copies of love languages. That's just the one book of many that he's written. And he says most of these copies have actually come from recommendations of couples or families that have experienced the power of love languages and have told somebody else, you should try this, you should read this. Now, having said all that, let's go a little bit further. Intimate relationships also depend on many more factors than love languages, such as mental and physical health, finances, lifestyle choices, changing belief structures, just to name a few. So finally, what am I going to recommend to you tonight? Well, here it goes. Personally, I am deeply indebted to Chapman's model. His insights are simple, they're generalizable, they're biblically based, and they have enriched my marriage and my family life with our 3 children in very profound ways. They've literally worked for us. Even just the other night, we were Zooming on Sunday night, and we were just freely talking in the family about our love languages. It's a kind of communication that we've developed, and it's natural to us.
Mm-hmm.
And so even when I'm sharing with other couples, I often mention Gary Chapman. And can you believe no one has ever come back and told me that this suggestion was a waste of time? In fact, just the opposite. So let's conclude in summarizing my 4 purposes tonight with this. To share an awareness of why love languages could be important within our long-lasting relationships. I hope that's come through for you. It's all about filling our emotional love tank and filling it in an intentional and informed way. An informed way means we understand our primary love languages. Secondly, to build a picture of its potential to enrich our family life. I hope you don't mind me talking personally tonight.
No, of course
anecdotally, if you like, but it has enriched our family life. There's no doubt about it. So this is one of the reasons I've been glad to share these ideas with you and these thoughts with you. Have we summarized the key ideas from Gary Chapman's 2015 edition? I hope we have. We've gone through the 5 levels. Yeah, we've gone through them.
It's been really good.
And I hope that that's given you a flavor of them, just a taste of them, because there's a lot more in his work and in his books. And then finally, to explain how you might take this further in your own lives, appreciating there are both strengths and limitations in applying Chapman's model. So let's just conclude with the resources. Now there's just so many resources out there on the internet. So I've just tried to summarize a couple of them for you that you might want to go for. Definitely the 2015 edition, The 5 Love Languages, The Secret to Love That Lasts, is my first recommendation. You can buy it for $23 from Koorong. You can even get it as an ebook for $13. And as I said, 10 million sold in over 50 languages. So there's something good happening there. You can also get a quiz at the back of this book, which allows you to work out your primary love language. And you can go online and do it. My daughter India was just telling me she has done it recently online. And there are online love languages for couples, teens, singles, and children. So you've got a free quiz there to find it. And then, as I said, if you just Google books by Gary Chapman, you will have overchoice. There are many, many books out there that he's written. And one book I haven't got hold of, which I'm going to get hold of, which I saw actually tonight when I was looking at these, is God Speaks Your Love Language. So I thought, wow, I'm looking forward to reading that.
Sounds interesting too, yeah.
So Robert and Sharon, here we go. That's the presentation tonight.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Yeah, that's much appreciated. And I can certainly hear that you're very excited about it, and especially because it has been impactful. And that's always the biggest recommendation out there, isn't it?
Yeah, it has been. As I said right at the beginning, Sharon, there are just a few things that I have held on to over the years that I've used in courses, management training courses, on time management and dealing with difficult people. There's an endless list of management training courses. And some of those little models that are in those training courses are brilliant. They're fantastic. They're really helpful. And Gary Chapman's is right up there. It has really stuck with me. And so I just wanted to mention that I think there's a lot of what we call face value in Gary's works. And the challenge for all of us is to say, well, do I want to enrich my marriage with my partner, or do I want to enrich my family life with my children? And you can start tonight. You can start tomorrow. You can start next week. You can start next month. Perhaps the sooner we start, the better. Because, as I said, I wish I'd known some of this 33 years ago.
Yeah.